There's a revision lesson on Islam practices. Now this is one of two revision lessons on Islam. The first was Islam beliefs and teachings, so please make sure you've checked out that one as well. So this is the second half of the Islam content that we covered in Year 9. In this video lesson, I'm going to give you an overview of the 6 topics in this unit. I'm going to test you on them. I'm going to give you 6 questions on each of these 6 topics, so please have a pen and paper ready. Then this is going to allow you to identify areas that you're confident on and, importantly, areas that you want to improve. Then you can go off and do some revision so you can find out the information that you're missing and strengthen your understanding of the topics that you're weakest on. The last thing that I'm going to end with in this video then is some practice questions, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You've got to learn the information, but then it's about being able to apply it to exam style questions. So I've got a range of different questions for you to practice right at the end of this video. Here are the 6 topics then. We're going to go through each one, and for each I'm going to give you 6 questions. So please be ready to write down your answers. Let's start with Sunni and Shia. Please write down the first subtitle, Sunni and Shia. I'll give you 6 questions. I'll read out all these questions, and then after I've finished reading them, you can pause to give you enough time to actually write down your answers in detail. Okay, let's begin. Our first set of 6 questions for Sunni and Shia. Question 1. What is a caliph? Question 2. Who did Sunnis and Shia want to be caliph? Question 3. What do the terms Sunni and Shia mean? Question 4. What does the hadith say that supports Abu Bakr as caliph? 5. What does the hadith say that supports Ali as caliph? And the last question, question 6. What are 3 differences in how Sunni and Shia pray? Okay, now pause this video to make sure you have time to write down all the answers. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the second topic. So a new subtitle please on your paper or in your book, 5 pillars. 6 more questions. Question 1 is, what type of Muslim has the 5 pillars? 2. When is Psalm done? 3. What do Muslims say for the Shahada? 4. What's the stage of Hajj called that involves running between 2 hills? 5. Explain Salah using 3 key terms or more. And the last question 6. What is an impact for Zakah? Pause the video and write down your answers. Third topic, the 10 obligatory acts. Write that down as a subtitle. 6 more questions. Question 1. Which of the 5 pillars is not part of the 10 obligatory acts? Question 2. What is Khums and how is it used? 3. What is the source for encouraging others to do good, discouraging the bad? Now, these are 2 separate obligatory acts of the 10, but they actually have the same source. What I'm looking for in this question is a quote and where that quote is from. Question 4. What is the impact of discouraging the bad? Question 5. What does tabara mean? And the last question, what ways do Shia follow Twalia? Pause the video, write down your answers. Topic 4. Okay, we're now looking at jihad. So new subtitle again, 6 more questions. Question 1. What does jihad mean? 2. Is jihad part of the 5 pillars or 10 obligatory acts? 3. What are the 2 types of jihad? 4. Explain what the 2 types mean. 5. Give an example of how a Muslim would follow jihad every day in their daily life. 6. What is the source for these 2 types of jihad? Pause the video, write down your answers. The 5th topic is Ashura. New subtitle, 6 more questions. Who was Hussein? Question 2. What is a martyr? Question 3. Where was Hussein killed? 4. What is Ashura about for Shia Muslims? 5. What is Ashura about for Sunni Muslims? And 6. What do Shia do on Ashura? In this one I'm looking for a description of actions they might do to celebrate Ashura. Pause the video, write down your answers. The last topic then is festivals. Now, of course, Ashura is a festival as well. So in this last topic, we're looking at 2 more festivals. First question is, what does Eid mean? Question 2. When is Eid al-Fitr celebrated? Question 3. How might a Muslim family celebrate Eid al-Fitr? I'm looking for at least 3 separate ways. What does Eid al-Adha remember? Question 5. How do Muslims celebrate Eid al-Adha? And the last question, what is an impact of Eid al-Adha? Remember, an impact is an action that Muslims would do today as a result of a belief or a practice that they have. Okay, that's the last set of 6 questions. So please make sure you pause it if you need a little bit more time, and then we're going to go over the answers. Right, we're going to go over the answers now. So what's important in this stage is that you are writing down a mark out of 6 for each of these 6 topics. Okay, so for Sunni and Shia, you should be giving yourself a mark out of 6. What this is going to let you do then is going to allow you to identify which of these 6 topics you're most confident with and which were areas to improve on. Okay, let's go through the first set of answers. So Sunni and Shia. So question 1, a caliph is a Muslim leader after Muhammad. Question 2, so Sunnis wanted Abu Bakr, Shia wanted Ali. Now Sunni means people of tradition, and the word Shia means supporters of Ali. Now, when we're looking at our source here, question 4 and 5 are going to both be the hadith. Now, for question 4, this is the Sunni view. The hadith says Muhammad chose Abu Bakr to lead the prayers as Muhammad was lying on his deathbed. So that supports the Sunni view. Now, Shia are also going to use the hadith because they're going to point to the fact that in the hadith, Muhammad is recorded as raising Ali's hand in front of a crowd and saying, anyone who followed me should follow Ali. So you can see that actually Sunni and Shia, they both have the same source. They're using the hadith, the record of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, to support who they thought should have been leader, caliph, after Muhammad died. You can see, therefore, why it was such a contentious and debatable topic. The last question then, so 3 differences in how Sunni and Shia pray. Here are some ideas. Maybe you had other things, but here are some ideas of what you could include it. Could have talked about the amount of times per day Sunni and Shia pray. So Sunnis pray 5 times per day, Shia pray 3. However, it's interesting to note that they do the same prayers. So Shia do 5 prayers, they just have some of them combined. So they do 3 different times per day, whereas Sunnis do it 5 different times per day. Another difference is Shia will often use a turba. This is a clay or a disc which they will rest their head on when they're prostrating. Now, the reason they do this is because they would refer to the hadith which talks about Prophet Muhammad praying on the ground. Okay, not inside, not on a carpet. So even if they're praying inside, they have like a little disc made of clay to represent the earth, which they would rest their head when they're actually doing their prostrations, when they're bending over in their prayers. So Shia use that, but Sunnis do not. And then another difference is Shia start with their arms at their side, whereas Sunnis start their prayers with their arms folded. Okay, let's go on to answers for topic 2, the 5 pillars. So what type of Muslim has the 5 pillars? It's Sunni Muslims. 5 pillars are for Sunni Muslims. Saum is done during the month of Ramadan, so Sunnis also fast on Ashura. Coming onto that a little bit later. But most of the time when you're thinking of Saum, you're thinking of the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting. So the Shahada is saying there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Of course, this is usually said in Arabic. Question 4. Well, the stage, which involves running between the 2 hills, that's called Sa'i. And they're running between the 2 hills. The hills are called Safa and Marwa. And you might also remember why they're doing this. They're remembering the journey of Hajar, which is the wife of Ibrahim, who was looking for water for her son Ishmael. So she's running up one hill to see if she can find any water. She ran down, ran up another hill to see if she can find any water. So during Hajj, they're kind of following the footsteps of Hajar, the wife of Ibrahim, remembering this kind of piece of their history. Question 5. Okay, so explain Salah using 3 key terms or more. Well, you could have talked about for the Sunnis is 5 times per day. You talk about facing Mecca. You talk about the fact that they wash beforehand. This is called wudu, or sometimes you could use the English term ablutions, but I think it's better using wudu. Also, wudu is a bit easier to remember. And you could talk about Jummah prayers, which is Friday prayers, where Muslims will often go to the mosque. Those are some ideas of key terms that you should have used. The last question then, an impact for zakah. Well, zakah is giving money to charity, in precisely 2.5% of your money to charity. And that's your surplus money. So after you spent money on taking care of yourself, like food and shelter, your home, then 2.5% of your extra. Well, an impact of this, the Muslims believe it purifies your wealth and also helps the less fortunate than you. And what would be really good is if you actually give an example of a charity they might give money to. So Islamic Relief is one of the biggest Muslim charities in the world, so that's a good one to reference. It's even better, in fact, if you can talk about some of the work they're doing. For example, right now, doing a lot of work in Yemen, because in Yemen, unfortunately, there's a lot of people without food, so they're helping supplying food to prevent people from starving. Let's go on to the third topic. The 10 obligatory acts. Okay, well, these are for Shia, because we just covered the Sunni 5 pillars. So the 10 obligatory acts, the first question asks, which of the 5 pillars is not part of the 10 obligatory acts? And that's Shahada. The other ones, so that's Psalm, Hajj, Zakah, and Salah, they're all part of the 10 obligatory acts, but Shahada isn't. Now remember, this doesn't mean that Shia Muslims don't do Shahada. They still do Shahada. That's how you become a Shia Muslim, for example. But it's just not listed as one of their 10 obligatory acts. It's kind of assumed, of course, you'd say this and believe this. Okay, but it's important to remember Shahada is one of the 5 pillars, but it's not one of the 10 obligatory acts. Second question is on Khums. Well, Khums is a 20% tax on your annual profits. So annual means over a year, and profits means your extra money. After you've kind of spent the money that you need to, stuff you've got left over is your profits. And what usually happens is half of this, so 50%, is given to religious causes. So that could be to the mosque, or it could be to help the poor descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. That's something that Shia think is very important. And the other half, the other 50%, is just given to help those in need in the community. Question 3. Okay, so encouraging others to do good and discouraging the bad, although they're two separate obligatory acts out of the list of 10, their source is the same. So the Quran states, and this is a quote that you can use, encourage what is good and forbid that which is bad. And that's where these two different obligatory acts come from. Question 4. Well, a good impact here would be linking to this keyword, the ummah, which is the Muslim community. So if you're discouraging people from doing bad things, so doing things which are haram, to use another keyword, then this is going to help the community. And you could give an example of what might it encourage them to do. It might encourage them to do something good, for example, zakah. Question 5 then. So tabara means to hate evildoers. Question 6. So twalia. So twalia is loving the friends of Allah. Now, how might you do that? Well, Shia would do this by showing love for the Prophet Muhammad, the 12 Imams, who they think are all very, very important people who were linked to the Prophet Muhammad, so part of his family and descendants. They pay khums, so remember, half of that goes towards descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. And they might also visit tombs or shrines, so holy sites, to pay their respects to people who have died in the past, who either were related to the Prophet Muhammad or did important work for the religion. Okay, topic 4, jihad. So jihad means to struggle in the way of Allah. That's the best definition. It does not mean holy war. That is not a correct definition of jihad. Make sure you're putting it this way. It is to struggle in the way of Allah. Now that can mean different things, and sometimes it can mean violence, but to translate it as holy war would be inaccurate, as we will see when we look at the 2 types of jihad. So, it is part of the 10 obligatory acts. It's not part of the 5 pillars. However, it's often considered the unofficial 6th pillar in Sunni Islam, but it isn't officially one of the 5. So the 2 types that you need to know about are called lesser jihad and greater jihad. So lesser jihad is fighting in self-defense. So remember, jihad can mean fighting, but it is limited to in self-defense or to protect the innocent. And then the greater jihad is just about doing the right thing yourself, It's about following your religion, about being what would be considered a good Muslim. So following the 10 obligatory acts or following the 5 pillars. Okay, number 5, give an example of how a Muslim would follow jihad every day. Well, this is where you want to talk about the 5 pillars, 10 obligatory acts, and then give an example. So you could say zakah, or you could say salah, praying 5 times a day if you're Sunni, or 3 times if you're Shia. Okay, number 6, what's the source? Well, it's the hadith which we're looking for here, and more specifically it talks about how Muhammad was speaking to a band of warriors who just returned from a battle, and he said to them that you've been doing the lesser jihad, but now you must start the greater jihad, which means every day trying to be a good person, being a good Muslim, following the 5 pillars or 10 obligatory acts. Okay, let's look at Ashura now. So your answers here. The grandson of the Prophet Muhammad and the son of Ali. That is who Hussein was. What's a martyr? Someone who dies for their religion. Hussein was killed in Karbala, which is in present-day Iraq, and this is actually a site that a Shia might wish to visit, okay, because it's an important part of their history. What is Ashura about for Shia Muslims then? Well, it celebrates and mourns for Hussein, who they believe should have been caliph but was killed. Now Sunnis, they celebrate Ashura totally differently. They don't have a special event to remember Hussein. Instead, Ashura is a time to fast and remember something completely different. They remember the Prophet Musa, who is Moses in Christianity and Judaism. Okay, Prophet Musa. Now you remember that in the story of Musa or Moses, there's the story about the parting of the Red Sea, where the Hebrews were able to flee from the Egyptians. So Muslims remember how Allah saved these people by performing that miracle. So that's for Sunnis. So they do mark Ashura, they have Ashura as a celebration, an event, but it's about remembering Prophet Musa, and they fast in order to say thank you for this. So what do Shia do on Ashura? Well, here are some examples, and you want to remember a few of these. Wearing black is very common. Marching on the streets. In fact, this happens in London as well. There'll be an annual march. They'll tell stories about Hussein, who he was, what he stood for. And also, a minority of Shia will actually hit themselves. So they'll hit their backs with chains, and that's to feel pain, a bit like to feel what it must have been like to sacrifice for your religion, like they believe Hussein did. Now it's very important though that is actually a minority of Shia, and many Shia actually disagree with this way of remembering Hussein. So it's very controversial, it's quite extreme, but it's interesting. It's interesting that some people do that, so you can include that as long as you're specifying it's a minority that do this, okay? Because you don't want to generalize, because that would not be accurate. Okay, the 6th topic was festivals, and there's the other 2 festivals, the 2 Eids. Big Eid and Little Eid is another way of putting it. So what does Eid mean? Well, Eid just means celebration. So Eid al-Fitr is a 3-day celebration at the end of Ramadan. So after a whole month of fasting, there's a big celebration which brings it to an end. So how might a Muslim family celebrate it? Well, they decorate their homes, they might go for special prayers in the mosque, okay, Salah. They might send cards, so Eid Mubarak just means Happy Eid, might send these cards. They might visit friends, family, have a big special meal. Think about it, you've had a whole month of fasting, you want to celebrate that by having a really good meal with your family. And they might also give to charity and to those less fortunate. 4. What does Eid al-Adha remember? It remembers Ibrahim. It's all about that story of Ibrahim, how he was asked to sacrifice his son Ishmael, but at the last second God provided a sheep or a ram as a sacrifice instead, so it was a test of his faith. So Eid al-Adha is remembering how Ibrahim showed his faith, kept his faith. How is Eid al-Adha celebrated then? Well, often the family will pay to have a sheep killed, sacrificed, and then this meat is shared amongst the family, and also some is given to the poor. They will give gifts, sometimes they'll wear new clothes and visit the mosque. And impact then? Well, the Muslim Ummah is a great key word to use, it just means community. They feel united. Well, why might they feel united? Feel united because all Muslims are doing Eid al-Adha together, even the Muslims on pilgrimage, because the pilgrimage, Hajj, actually ends with Eid, the Eid al-Adha celebration, okay, the festival of sacrifice. Okay, that is our answers for the last of the 6 topics. So what you should have now is a mark out of 6 for each of these 6 topics. Now analyse this. How did you do? Which topic did you find hardest and which were you most confident on? Now it might be that you thought, wow, I find all of them quite difficult. And that's okay as well, because what I want you to do now is, I want you to think about, well, which one did you find most challenging? Which was the hardest? Because that's the one that I want you to now focus on and start improving, okay? So what I'd like you to do is this. I want you to go away and revise whichever topic you discovered was the most challenging. How do I want you to do this? Well, 2 ways. You can look at your book and check your notes that you took in lesson, okay? Now, it might mean looking at last year's book. Do that, please. And the second thing I'd like you to do is you can look at the resources, the lesson resources that we made available for you. It might be the case that you missed the lesson. So now is the perfect time to make sure you go back and you get those notes and use this video to help you see what it is that you need to learn. Okay, so do one of those 2 things. Either just look back in your own book or go away and look at those lessons again. Read the information sheet for that topic. Okay, so after you've done that, try this test again. See if you can get 6 out of 6 for all the topics. Now, do this without looking at your notes again, because you need to go away and revise, practice, and then try and do this without your notes in front of you, and see if you can get a better score than last time. And then the last thing we're going to do is have a go at some practice questions. So the next slide here, I'm going to show you some practice questions that I'd like you to complete. Here we go. We've got 3 questions for each of A, B, C, and D. If you're able to do all these questions, then that means you can be really confident with the exam.